If I didn't have my network, I probably wouldn't want to get into oil and gas unless I had 5 to 10 million as a basis point. Like, let's say I didn't have my network and all these rich people I know and stuff to take money from. I would assume a general guy would need 5 or 10 million bucks to kind of get it rolling.
Yeah, that makes sense. You talked about your network. What do you think, and how do you think your network has expanded beyond the fact that you're good at what you do and you're a personable person? Like, do you think it's just like you like to have fun and you take people on trips, or is like, how did you?
No, I mean, sure, there's some of it, but I'll tell you, with my party days, I mean, I spent a lot of money, right? I did a lot of yachts and stupid stuff, and those people, you can kind of. It was actually a good way of validating a person, right? So if I take out 10 people from the business world, and only one of them brings up chipping in or doing something, right? I'm not like hosting them. We're going out. If I'm the one that's always paying for stuff and I watch people when the check comes and stuff, I watch that stuff. It's the same thing. I won't do business with somebody. If I go to a restaurant and they're rude to the waitstaff, I won't do business. That's been my mentor's rule for a long time, and I follow that same suit.
How you do everything.
Yeah. So I think it was beneficial in that regard. I don't think a lot of the people that I have had long-term and still relationships with came from that era. At the time, it made sense because I had like hard money lenders and stuff and private lenders. That was smaller, right? But I would say most of my network has come from higher end masterminds. Like family masterminds, a really good one. A lot of people in there. But it's how you treat people, right? If you treat people well and you do good business with them and things like that, they will always connect you.
In this episode of Make America Remote Again, I had the pleasure of interviewing Alex Ottewell to talk about his story from being a multimillionaire in real estate and doing it for over a decade, fix and flipping over 1,000 homes, to going into the oil industry and facing some of the biggest challenges of his life. Guys, so many people, when they are focusing on one industry, they go all in and they don't move to an industry that is much more competitive. And I was so interested to find out more about why Alex did it, what is his mission and vision of doing this, and ultimately find out what is the long-term plan here. Check out the episode, like, comment, subscribe, share with other people, and I'll see you on the episode.
Welcome back to Make America Remote Again. I'm here with Alex Ottewell, all the way in Miami, but this guy's the king, and he's known to be the king of Tampa. Alex, what brings you to Miami today?
Well, come talk to you.
I love it. And I was telling you, I've did a little bit of research and digging into who Alex Ottewell is based on YouTube. So obviously we're going to find out more today.
There you go.
And your story is fascinating because a lot of people, when they get into real estate, that's the end all be it all. Like, that is the goal, is to get into real estate. But you've transitioned out to something that I think most people can only dream of. And I want to get into that. But for the people that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about how you even got into real estate in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So I was 19. It was right after high school. Crash had happened, the 2008-9 catastrophe. So I started going to tax deed sales. My dad at the time was restarting some things. He had lost a few things, and he's like, "Hey, you want to come fix up these cheap, crappy houses I'm buying, 5-10 grand?" I mean, people in real estate now don't understand that even in Tampa, I was buying block houses back then for 20-30 grand. So it was a different era. There was no hard money lending. There was no, major access to capital. It was a lot of personal network. So started doing the tax deeds, bought a ton of them, went into seller direct marketing. That's where my call center came in. MGI Phone Services. We got it endorsed by Kevin Harrington. That was pretty helpful. Scaled that up to over 200 employees. And that was my real estate journey. Did over 1,000 deals throughout the time. Yeah. And I was a fix and flipper with a bit of wholesale mixed in. We had a JV business too, which was basically just finding buyers for wholesalers.
So before we dive into the transition of what you're doing now, tell us a little bit more about the VA agency you had in the Philippines. I mean, over 200 people, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to build, and what was the idea behind it?
We went over 100 employees within 120 days. So it was quick. Here's what happened, right? So at the time, I had 8 VAs personally with a kid in the Philippines. And we were talking about stuff, and he's like, "Alex," I have like 25 staff members at the time. He said, I don't understand why your campaign is getting 2,000 interested leads a month and all my other ones are doing, a fraction of that. And I kind of said to him, I said, well, script and part of our quality control and what we were doing. And he said, well, I don't really know how to build that. He's a young kid. He said, would you be interested in kind of doing a partnership together? So I said, okay. And this was just after COVID. So I had a lot of extra free time. I sat down for 60 days straight, literally just building out SOPs, what we were doing, but at a scaled level. One of the things I did with that business, and I think why we scaled so quickly, was because I didn't build it based on 10 people. I built it based on a 1,000-person company. And I was like, okay, if I had 1,000 VAs, what would be the procedures that I would want in place in order to keep those people accountable? At the time, the Philippines was all locked down, so everybody was sitting at home. If they had a laptop and a headset, it was a very convenient time to have them on board. A lot of our incentive structures and things like that, they became a very prominent part of that business and why it scaled so quickly.
That's amazing. And I want to dive one step further in there, because most people, when they hire Filipinos, it's a mixed bag when it comes to sales. And I have an internal team for the Philippines. They're incredible. And we've hired a lot of them, hundreds of Filipinos. Yeah. What made you guys choose the Filipinos for cold calling? Like, was it like a quantity over quality type of?
No, not at all. Actually, it was literally the fact that I was already using, this guy's service, and he had a small amount of people. So it kind of fit in. He was already in the business. When we scaled, we used a lot of his family members and stuff as management. So it just made a lot of sense to be in the Philippines. I mean, I definitely split tested some Colombian callers and things like that. The kicker was one of our redeeming qualities was at the time, we're charging $6 an hour. I put some minimums in place, like we had a 30-hour-a-week minimum. We had to have 2 callers and things like that to cover management. But the kicker behind it was if you go to a lot of other countries, the price point changes a little bit, so the margin wasn't there. So we needed to be in a place that was a bit more cost prohibitive at the time. Bear in mind, it wasn't as a competitive thing back then, so there was less people
for sure
going after them.
Today, I feel like everybody and their mom has an agency in the Philippines. Yeah. So that was your lead gen. Was that your main lead gen? Did you also do Facebook ads?
Exclusive.
Okay, and then talk to me about the rest of your team when you were building the real estate. Who was doing the acquisitions? Did you have a lead manager? What was that like?
Well, oddly enough, initially I only had 1 or 2 acquisitions at a time. Because remember, I was a fix and flipper, so we didn't need to do as many deals as a wholesaler. My average flip was $35,000 to $50,000 profit. My average price point of purchase was between $75,000 and $125,000. I was, king of trailers was my nickname because I would buy mobile homes on land because I found a window of opportunity in the fact that people can't afford a single family regular block home, they drop down to the next category. And if I had a really pretty mobile home with land product, I was able to deliver it to those people that couldn't afford the single family in that neighborhood.
So the margins were much better, but where you invested heavily was the lead gen, the call center, rather than your internal team. Did you have a team in Tampa as well? Or?
Yeah. So I had 1 to 2 acquisitions at any time, but we were typically picking up on the fix and flip side, 8 projects a month, and then on the wholesale side, we were only doing a handful. Later on, when I went to JV, obviously we did more.
Got it.
But it wasn't a case of volume with fix and flip. It's more, we wanted to have a raw amount of leads because then we could cherry pick the biggest winners, right?
Yeah.
So I trained my team not to spend a ton of time on the phone if we knew it wasn't a big winner. We kind of went after the low-hanging fruit. That was kind of it. And then as far as the construction crews, I had all those guys in-house. So I had 4 crews running at the same time. That's why we were able to do so many projects, because I had multiple crews and I had subcontractors on top of that. So between the 2, we were able to, scale up the fix and flip operation.
So then you had the operation for over a decade, and then one day you woke up, you're like, F this,
Pretty much.
I just want to do something different.
It was actually on Instagram. So in March of 22, interest rates were around 2.5. And I put up a post, which got a lot of shit. I said, hey, interest rates are going to go to 8%, I think. I think we're going to see 40% of realtors unemployed. I said crypto at the time was, I think, 35,000. I said it's going to go to 15. Like, I was putting all these random predictions out that I felt were real. And a couple months after that, I woke up in Houston after partying with a couple of my Houston buddies. And I was like, screw it, I'm done fix and flipping. So I literally posted, hey, after over a decade, I'm closing my fix and flip operation. I had 25 projects going on at the same time.
Why close and not exit? Why didn't you try to sell?
I mean, truth of the matter, it's just like a wholesale business. It's very difficult to exit. Fix and flip in general, sure, you have processes and a model, but I mean, a lot of people fix and flip houses, and everybody has their own niche, what they do. There's nothing really proprietary about fix and flip, I don't believe. Sure, there's certain ways of approaching business, but I don't think it was a scalable operation to really sell.
Yeah. And obviously you made good amount of money.
Yeah.
And did you take a break and then like try to figure out life? Where did this next chapter?
Kind of. I was already on a break in some regard because the last year and a half, 2 years, I was doing partying, having fun. I just hit a point in my career where I was just burned out, bored of dealing with the same headaches over and over. We went into the JV wholesale heavier. We had Robert Wensley's investor lift, cartel mode. I was just slinging out deals for other people. And then I heard about oil and I was like, hey, that sounds like a new venture. Let's go deep dive into that.
Yeah.
And I jumped in January of 23. I opened the company. No knowledge, no understanding of anything, just dove in and said, I'm going to hire some experts and have them teach me.
You say no knowledge, but you had a lot of knowledge in terms of growing a business and
Correct.
building a team. So you just had no experience in the oil industry, right?
Right.
Before we dive into this, did you have any interest of doing oil at any time in your life? Is that something that ever interested you?
I didn't even know you could own an oil company. And
Because to most people, it sounds like you have to come from a family that owned oil companies.
Yeah, well, that's the majority of operators. There's probably only less than a dozen people a year that are opening new oil companies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And typically with it is a generational thing. And that's where I'm coming into it because I see the gap between the past generation, which were willing to work hard and build these huge companies, so their kids that don't want to keep that business, they're ready to move on.
So this could be a question completely off, like script. Have you ever researched like Rockefellers and how they got their start with oil and how they were able to, because they were really the first OGs in terms of.
Yeah. So in my opinion, I try not to get too heavy in adding too many other people's ways of doing it. I know it goes against the grain of salt, but in my opinion, if you have too many different ideas, you never execute on one really well. So what I've always tried to do is, we broke down the different versions of running an oil company, right? I ran different scenarios of different models, just like real estate. You could be a fix and flipper, Airbnb,
wholesale,
or whatever you want. Yeah. Same thing occurs in oil. So I looked at all the different verticals and then we decided on one that I felt was the lowest level of risk and the easiest barrier of entry, even though it's a high barrier. I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
But it's the lower.
Can you tell us more about that? Like, what is that? What are the levels of oil? Because it sounds obviously one of them is being a trust fund, but how does a person get into the space?
Well, the way I did it, I hired a reservoir engineer. So those are, petroleum-based guys. And I had him come into the office, and when he first started, he's like, hey, what are we getting into? What project are we working on? I said, hey, teach me oil and gas. So I literally had a whiteboard up, and for 3 months, we sat there and just went through the fundamentals of how oil and gas works, the mechanics of it, the engineering part, geology, how things are identified. Because truth of the matter, majority of CEOs in every business don't actually have detailed knowledge of that specific business, right? More than likely, they have enough understanding to make a decision. And that's all people really need to do. I mean, if you're not physically working, on the mechanical stuff and whatnot, I have an engineer that I can ask a question to and he'll give me an answer. Sure, I need to know the core fundamentals of the financial side and how the transactions work. But beyond that, I mean, I choose to learn more, but you don't necessarily need it if you're going to operate with a team that is already experienced.
So that one person was he like a co-founder for you, or how did you guys partner?
No, I hired him. So
you hired him?
Yep.
To learn from him and.
Yeah, so he was a younger kid. He was a few years out of school, and he was a teacher's aide at one point. So he was used to teaching people. So that's what I told him up front that, hey, I'm new to oil. So he was already had a background in kind of showing people things. Now, 6 months later, I did end up letting him go because he was a little too inexperienced. We talked about it and moved on. And I brought in a guy that had 15 years experience, much more detailed and understood geology better and things like that. So I'd say first phase, I had that guy. Second phase, the more expanded guy that's still with me to today.
So now you've been doing it for close to 2 years?
Yeah, year and 19 months.
19 months, okay, gotcha. So it's growing, and obviously you're starting to, you're on the podcast to talk more about it. Like what is the goal here? What's the mission that you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so one of the typical things that happens, I get, because being from a real estate background, majority of my friends are in real estate. And they all kind of have a, basic understanding of what I'm doing, but they don't really get it, right? Majority of people equate oil to gasoline. And that's kind of, it's correct. There's definitely production that's generated from for gasoline, but it's only about 30 to 40% of the oil barrel. The rest of it goes to plastics and makeups and petroleum-based things, right? Anything with petroleum is derived from an oil barrel. So when I hear the general public talking about EV and things like that as if it's going to kill oil and gas, they're crazy. But the downfall is the majority of oil companies are not educating consumers on what's going on with oil.
Oh.
So when you want to think of longevity for the industry, that's one of the reasons why I just got featured in Nate Magazine as CEO. You know, it's a pretty wild feature because like it's not like, hey, I'm featured on Fox, I paid $500. Like these people featured me as a CEO.
They reached out to you and
because I was doing an impactful thing by making awareness to oil and gas, what's going on. I mean, a guy in his 80s that owns a multi-billion-dollar company could give a crap less, to be honest with you, what the consumer thinks of him. I want to go out there and kind of create not even advocacy, because truth of the matter, people are going to love you or not, but at least if they have the education, they'll be able to make their own decision.
And that makes a lot of sense because you're basically taking people that are completely unaware, especially the people that you know, these are your friends are all very successful. They've been doing real estate for a long time. So maybe it's like you're the one that's going to set the trend for maybe that's something that they could also do in the future.
Yeah, or even participation, right? Because a lot of guys I know in real estate, you know, they have their thriving business and then they have things they invest in. Maybe they put stocks or, you know, different types of random deals. But the same thing occurs here, right? If I'm buying oil and gas companies or I'm buying existing fields, they can come participate with me. That's why I created the fund. So OWP Capital Group is all about onboarding capital from accredited investors in order to give them the ability to participate alongside me as I'm growing this company.
That's really smart. You mentioned the EV and like where electric cars are going to be. I mean, they're already part of our life, but
Correct.
It feels like in the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to be the majority of vehicles. So how does oil not hurt because of that? And is that
So in order, I can't remember the exact figures behind it, but the problem is our electrical grid will not allow the consumption of electric that needs to be in place for EV. So if you took all gasoline cars off the planet and you said, hey, they're all going to be EV, we don't have enough electricity to support it. And the kicker is oil wells are also the same wells that are producing natural gas. So you get gas and oil out of the same well initially, and then whatever the primary is for that formation, you know, meaning where we're drilling down to the layers of the earth, that primary comes out and then it becomes an oil well or a gas well, whatever it may be. But if you think about it, we need natural gas to create electricity. That's one of the, 30, 40% of our electric grid comes from natural gas. So the idea and the notion that we're going to get rid of natural gas and oil wells is kind of crazy because if you do need more electricity, you need more natural gas.
You're right? Do you not think where technology is headed that we're going to be fine? There's going to be a solution to what you just said because maybe it's not there right now, but
Yeah.
is there?
I mean, I'm no scientist, right?
Yeah.
I do have a scientist in the office, but when it comes down to it, the downfall in current EV, and don't get me wrong, I'm an Elon Musk fan.
Yeah.
Love the guy. I think he's
That's
a genius.
as you're saying. I'm like,
Yeah, 100%.
what would Elon Musk say
I
right
don't
now?
argue with Elon in the sense of, he's definitely moving towards a better future or whatnot for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe with lithium mining and the way the extraction methods and stuff, it's not as clean as people assume. You know, if you look
It's
at
a lot of work too.
Yeah, I mean, you got giant mines out in Chile with kids and things like that, and people don't look into that. They look at, look at my nice shiny Tesla. Well, where did that battery power come from? And lithium batteries are, annotated technology. Like we need to increase that in order to be able to become a more electric grid.
If people looked up how we got lithium batteries, I think that would it would hurt society by waking us up to seeing how sad it is.
Well, the kicker is, right? This is how it works in a lot of different mining organizations. Look at gold, diamonds, things like that. They use, smaller third world countries, and I'm not saying Chile's a, small country or third world or whatever, but in general, they use places where they can, extract those materials and then they get sold to a wholesaler, and then that wholesaler does the transaction with the main company. They do that because it's a hands-off method, right? I'm not buying from the guy with the child labor. I'm buying from you. I don't know where it came from.
Blind
eye. Just
very
like politics,
blind eye,
right?
yeah.
I mean,
and Apple's doing it. Tesla's. I mean, it's not a.
Yeah,
it's not like
Apple. I know firsthand because one of my buddies, works for a massive Apple iPhone renovation company. They have a contract with Apple. They ship all those phones to China for the cheap labor. They sell them to them, so they're hands off, right? So they sell them to my buddy. He takes all those phones. They have 5,000 employees in each warehouse. They renovate all the phones and then they sell them back to Apple. So then Apple didn't use any kind of I knew this firsthand.
Yeah, and
I won't name drop him.
No, I know, I get it.
But
I
yeah,
get it.
yeah.
The battery comes from child slavery, and then they send it to be built in another.
Maybe not child, but even just sweatshops. I mean, that happens. I don't want to believe it, but it happens.
It's and there's nothing that we are small fish to $1 trillion company. What can someone like you, or even your friend, even if he was like, oh, I'm going to expose Apple, there's nothing you can do, right?
No, I mean, it's already out there. The thing
100%.
is, I feel like in this day and age, people are getting hit with so many different wild things occurring in the world that we're desensitized to the idea of a problem, right? We can see it as the news. Even President Trump getting shot, right? That would have been in the news for months back in the day. That probably barely lasted 4 days. I mean, not the fact Google's trying to interfere with our ads and stuff, but beyond that, like if you really think about it, we saw a president attempt assassination, and a handful of days later, boom, we're back to normal.
It's over.
It's crazy.
And that's just the nature of where the media is going. So let's talk like 10 years from now.
Sure.
Everything works as planned. Where do you see your company at? Like, what do you see?
So my initial goal, this is a funny story. I had hired a senior oil and gas attorney, right? So he had transacted tons of deals, over $20 billion exits or greater for companies. And though that sounds like a lot of money in the real estate world, just to give you a little example, if you're under $100 million company in oil and gas, you're deemed mom and pop. So like the threshold's a lot higher. But when it comes to the gentleman, I was talking to him on the phone. I said, hey, look, I'm trying to gauge where I should set my 5-year goal, right? We should always have goals in life, and you want to set them a little higher. So I said, hey, do you think I can get to $100 million with this company in 5 years, right? And he chuckled at me, and he said, well, I said, oh, I'm probably an idiot, right? That's what my thought was. And he responded back. He's like, Alex, if you can't get to $1 billion in 5 years, I'd be shocked. He's like, I've sold companies well over $1 billion many times for dumber people. He's like, you're way more intelligent than the majority of the guys I've sold companies for. If you can't hit $1 billion, I'd be shocked. And I said, whoa, holy crap. That rewired my brain, because I thought $100 million was a wild goal, but he was telling me $1 billion, right?
Yeah.
So my probably primary goal for the next 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years, is to build up a collection of assets and then have an exit, right? We'll exit the assets, we won't exit the company. The brand itself is built way better than I thought it would in oil and gas, to be frank. We have name recognition all across the world now, based on the marketing efforts I did and the things I did and the outlandish. We can get into that, but yeah, basically, I got companies all around the world calling me up, asking me to sell their companies to me. So I realized that my brand itself is building a value. So I'm probably not going to sell the brand. I'm going to sell the assets in the brand, and then take that capital and put it back in and see what we do next. Yeah.
I listened to one of your podcasts, and you talked about the businesses in Texas right now. Do you guys have like locations in Texas?
So we technically have an office in Midland, just for insurance purposes and stuff.
Yeah.
But as far as like headquartered, I mean, I'm in Tampa. I live in Tampa. I've been there for a long time. What you have to realize is there's a lot of people that live in Texas, right, for their oil operations. But once you've established systems, it's kind of like real estate, right? You can remotely manage properties and stuff. It's not perfect, but in general, we have assets in Texas, but we want to be open to the entire country to buy assets. Because if you think about it, the more open I can be with the location, the better I'll be on my value proposition. If I can go buy a deal that's a good deal, but it's in a different state, I'd rather go buy that deal than turn it away.
That makes sense.
And then the goal is to bolt on other accessory assets around it to drop your G&A costs. Because anytime you have a field, you have teams on there, pumpers, equipment. If I can add on some other fields around it, make it a bigger portfolio, now it becomes more valuable to the bigger buyers that want to come in.
So the short-term goal is to focus on U.S. soil, or do you eventually want to go to Dubai or anything like that?
No. I'll never leave the U.S. for it.
Okay.
It's a whole different ball game. I mean, I've already jumped into a realm that probably I shouldn't be in based on my experience. I'm a real estate guy that did really well at that, and but I don't want to be crazy in the sense that going to different countries. I don't think the need, right? The U.S. population has, or the U.S. grounds in general have massive reserves underground. We're not depleting of oil. So why bring it away from America? Part of our thing is U.S. Energy independence. I mean, that's the real goal, because the more we get away from utilizing U.S. energy, the more we're paying, the more we're being susceptible to other people. I mean, look at OPEC. They basically fluctuate our oil price all the time because they can. We don't want to be to the point where we're dependent on another country.
I love what you're doing. You're making America remote again, baby. So talk to me about your current staff, because you mentioned you have a scientist and then you partnered. Like, what's your team look like right now?
Yeah, so in the office, I have we have the reservoir engineer, assistant. Then we have investor relations director. So he was with Morgan Stanley for 25 years, co-head of global wealth. Big fun guy. I got another investor relations guy. Then I have a geologist that we use on a subcontractor basis. They're quite expensive. I mean,
They sound like high salaries, all of them.
Yeah, I mean, a good geologist will cost you $300,000 a year. So it doesn't always make sense at this point in our growth to have that guy in house, because I'm only probably using him 5-10 hours a week.
Yeah. Should have listened to geography. I did not know geography is that geologists make even anywhere near that. I always thought.
Yeah, no, it's great. And on top of that, a good geologist, really good, they'll take a percentage of acquisition or findings and things like that. So they can make even more. I mean, some of these geologists can rip 10, 20 million on a deal.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
How do you even find these people? Because you're not going on Indeed.
Yeah, LinkedIn's actually a pretty popular one when you're dealing with higher level staff members, right? Like if you're dealing with higher scope, it's probably pretty big. But also my reservoir engineer, the guy in the office, he's been in the game for 15 years. He's worked for a lot of different companies. He has a lot of people he knows, right? The network is very tight in oil and gas. They all talk to each other. So the ability of just reaching out
network
to, it's not as difficult as you think. There's ebb and flows to the staffing in oil and gas. It's like boom or bust. So there's a ton of guys needing a job, or there's nobody needing a job. It's very boom or bust.
What have you seen in terms of having to lead a team in real estate compared to having to lead a team in oil? Is there any differences in there, or is it because it sounds like you're dealing with like older people and like people that are
100%. I mean, I always ask questions. So a lot of people in life, in business, they don't want to be wrong, right? We're like, oh, I don't want to be wrong, so I'm just gonna say something. I've learned over my years that sometimes it's better to be the dumbest person in the room. So though I understand enough about oil and gas clearly to make decisions on purchasing and running operations and stuff, it's more of we're dealing with B2B. So in real estate, when you're on the acquisition side and the disposition, you have a retail consumer. They're not very educated in real estate. Majority of people aren't. Like in general, like everybody buys houses, for their own selves. They don't know anything about their house. They don't know their values or anything else. So it's a very difficult conversation. Typically in distress situations, you're dealing with guys that are more frantic, everything else. The oil and gas, when we're buying these deals and operating these deals, I'm dealing with professionals. They're oil companies. They understand oil. There's professional engineers, things like that. They're very high level conversations. So it's definitely, it keeps me on my toes. Let's put it that way. I never get bored talking to my engineer because he teaches me something new every day.
Do you feel like you've gone humbled being in this industry?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I was making a ton of money in real estate, and it's adjusted my lifestyle because I had to dial it back, being the fact that we're, starting something new. I didn't want to, keep going and spending like crazy when I'm trying to build a massive company.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard glimpses of your trips to Colombia, so I can only imagine.
Colombia wasn't my wild stuff. Tampa in general. I mean, I was a big party boy in Tampa for a year and a half, but I had already, the kicker is a lot of entrepreneurs, they have early success and then they spend the money, right? I went my entire 20s building business, right? And then when I turned 30, I was like, okay, I haven't really partied. I haven't done anything stupid. So I'll spend a year and a half doing yachts and planes and dumb stuff. But then, even that gets old, right? I mean, I don't live in Miami for a reason because Miami is just party central.
It's so funny you say that because I'm literally thinking, I'm like, Tampa now is much different than it was like 5 to 10 years ago. Yeah. It's much, I feel like more millennials move there and, whatever, partiers. But Miami's always been like the party centric. What made you not want to live here? Is because you knew it's a hard place to.
Yeah, I think that I like wholesome, right? And I don't think Miami's wholesome. I think Miami is a soulless city, in my opinion, and it could be argued by a lot of people. I mean, you got a great culture. I love the diversity of culture and Latin culture in general, but. The kicker is, I think everybody here is constantly trying to fight for presence and constantly trying to fight to be important and stuff like that. The cool part about Tampa is there's a lot more discussions without gloating. So I'll talk to, like, I had dinner with a guy last night that just sold half his company to a PE firm. It valued at $300 million, right? We had a casual dinner, we chatted, everything else. There was no bragging on either side. Like, it was just discussing business and collaboration. I feel like every time I'm in Miami, a guy wants to tell me about his new Lambo, and I'm just like, okay, that's cool, but your $5,000 a month payment doesn't impress me. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. It's
Like,
it's different people.
It's just, it's just silly. I want to be around people that want to grow together, and Miami's very, who's better?
You talked about shenanigans that you had to get with marketing, because oil companies don't really advertise, like literally never. So what did you, when you got into the space, where you're like, okay, there's a huge hole in, first of all, the education, but also in the marketing.
Yep.
What was the shenanigans, or what did you have to do in order to like?
So early on, I did the cold calling method of reaching out to people, right? Just like houses. I was like, okay, I'm going to cold call every operator in the United States. So I called all of them. There's only about 10,000.
I was literally going to say it's probably like.
Yeah, there's 10,000 that are active, and most of them aren't even that big. But in general, we reached out to all of them. And oddly enough, when I was reaching out, typically you would call people with an offer or something, and they'd be like, sure, I'm interested. Majority of the responses we were getting was, we don't know who you are. We don't believe you. Have a good one. And they'd hang up. I mean, I'd offer people 10, 15, $20 million for deals, and they would just tell me, hey, that sounds good, but I don't know you. Have a good one. So I realized I needed to build presence in the industry. And in February of my first year, so a month in, I'd gone to an event called NAPE, and it was a massive expo for oil and gas upstream operators. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to build a presence, maybe I should have a booth there, be a sponsor. So I called them up and I said, hey, do you have any sponsorships available? And they're like, yeah, we have these. These are $2,000, whatever, $3,000. I'm like, I want to say a little bit bigger. And they're like, well, we just had a main sponsor position open up. The guy isn't coming back this year. I said, okay, I'll take it. So I got the main sponsorship for the event. It's called Premier Sponsor, and there's 4 of them. And we're dead center when you walk through the door. I mean, bear in mind, there's 3,500 companies there. It's 10,000 people that attend. And, we were the main one. Wow. So I did a big splash. I had a giant booth, 2-story, booth babes. I gave away a $20,000 watch as a raffle. Just did like outlandish stuff. I had a big after party at my friend's bar down the street. And it caught a lot of attention, because they're like, who the heck are you? Why are you so loud? I mean, if you notice, like, my suit, it's a pinstripe of One World Petroleum.
I just noticed that.
Yep,
so funny. Wow.
The whole inside. I'm all about loud branding, and I'll tell you why. People remember you, right? If you are different in what you do, and they may make fun of you, and we definitely got hazed. We went viral on Twitter. There was a guy that called us out and said we were a Ponzi scheme and blah, 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 blah. And when we went viral, it created negative attention at first, but then it turned into positive. And that's where the bigger outreach came. It wasn't even just the event. It was the fact that we went 2.5 million views on Twitter, and all these other oil companies like, who the heck is this guy? I mean, there's rumors that we were literally backed by George Soros because it was One World Petroleum. So they're like, oh, it's George Soros' company. They're coming in for oil.
Because one world,
one movement.
NW, yeah.
So
interesting. What was the most controversial thing that you did, if you did anything?
I mean, the girls definitely were all, dressed tight dresses, and
this is like a corporate event, or
very corporate.
Wow.
Imagine The Big Short. Did you see that movie when they went there? It's the exact event it was.
That's hilarious.
Everybody's in gray suits. Everybody's whatever. And then me with lights, TVs all over the place, giving away a watch, tight dressed girls. And I'm 33. I mean, the average oil company owner is in their 60s. So it just...
Different. It's different.
We were loud.
Yeah. Loud and different.
Yeah.
And they were just not used to that.
Some people hated it. So I would say 50% loved us, 30% didn't understand us, 20% hated us.
That's a good number to be. You want to be more loved than hated, but you got to have the haters too, because they're the ones that are going to speak the loudest. Exactly. Yep. They're the ones that are going to comment on your stuff and keep the engagement. Is this and then from this event, they ended up like writing the magazine about you? Is the same company?
So Nape does a lot of different publicity stuff. They have golf expos, things like that. And they reached out to me. They said, hey, we want to feature you as CEO Spotlight. And I was like, okay, I mean, fine, that's great. I was kind of shocked, right? Because the other people that have been featured are like Harold Hamm, who he was one of the guys that kind of reinvented fracking, modernized it and stuff. He was the CEO of Continental Resources. I mean, his personal net worth is $22 billion. So he got featured. Occidental's CEO, they're a $190 billion a year company. She got featured. And then they were featuring little old me in Florida. Yeah. So I definitely didn't turn it down. But also, one of the things I want to say is important, because this happens a lot in real estate. people over embellish too much. I was very transparent. When people come up to me and said, hey, what do you own? Hey, we bought a couple of test assets and we're trying to build more. We're trying to buy more. We're trying to buy more. We're trying to buy more. I didn't say I was some, crazy making 5 billion a year or something. We didn't lie. I haven't lied once, but the fact that we're different and we're willing to kind of disrupt in our way,
Loud.
that created the buzz. And I'm riding that train. It's not a forever train because clearly we have to perform too. Of course. And we are. But it's kind of a cool kickstart, especially for a brand new company.
Brand new company in a brand new niche, but a niche that's been around longer than anything besides, like real estate, I guess. I don't know. It's like, it's, I don't know. It's like, I'm a podcast, listener. I listen to Robert Wensley podcast and, you name it. No one talks about oil, besides that they went from an oil car to an electric car. So it's like a really big difference. And, it's just interesting. So you talked about your plan. Let's go back to when you first started. What would you have done, knowing what you know now, sitting down, what would you have done different from the start to get you further ahead?
I probably would have aligned capital differently. So when I went into it, I know a lot of successful guys, right? A lot of real estate buddies and whatnot. But what I didn't realize was I didn't really have a vehicle to put them in. So initially, we kind of went into seeing like, okay, I'm going to buy. My first thought process, being a small-minded, I'm like, oh, I'll buy deals for $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. But then I realized the economics don't make sense when you're dealing. It's easier to buy a $20 million field that's scaled with team and everything else than buying a $1 million, $2 million deal. It's kind of like buying one rental versus buying a 100-unit apartment complex. It's easier to run that than it is the other one. So I probably made some mistakes on that. Our buy box shifted. Our focus shifted. I would also say, as I said, the fund, I waited longer than I probably should have. Not that it's a problem, we're raising capital now, but it probably added 4 or 5 months of time span to my business. I would say those are probably the main ones.
Okay, and looking at your real estate business when you first started, would you have gone harder on cold calling and built the call center faster, or would you?
No, tax deeds were very lucrative. I mean, one of my best deals in tax deeds, I bought a piece of land for $20,000. I put $8,000 clearing it. It was like 10 acres in Brooksville, middle of nowhere. I sold it for $120 on a note, so I was into it at 28. Sold for $120, got 20 down.
Wow!
And then over the course of the loan, it yielded like $240,000 between interest and payments and everything. So I took $28,000 at $240, right? So those kind of deals only existed in the tax deed space. You couldn't get you couldn't buy 10 acres for $20,000, nowadays or anything like that. So I think in that era, the first 6, 7, 8 years I was in tax deeds, that was way more lucrative than seller direct because people were beyond distress. They were already losing their house. And at the time when I started, the first few years, there was no capital.
Nothing, no.
There was tons of properties. Like, now you go to a foreclosure auction or something like tax deeds.
It's common.
They're all being sold, right? Back then, I would literally go to an auction. I didn't have enough money, right? Maybe I had like $100,000 on me, or whatever. And I would watch houses not sell at $15,000. They weren't selling. They would just, next. Wow. It was too cheap. I'm sorry. It was too readily available for cheap properties. So people would be like, I don't want that one. I'll take that one. But nowadays, that same house is trading for $300,000-$400,000. Same house for 15.
Inflation's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I watched your interview with our buddy RJ Barrett, and you talked about, I think the biggest win you ever had was like a 260.
That was the one I just explained.
Yeah, that's the one, right?
Yeah, okay. 260, 280, whatever it was.
That's crazy.
It's on my Instagram. I do that example deliberately because it's such a wide swing.
It's a huge swing, yeah.
I've had many others like it. I mean, I bought a motel in the Panhandle. I paid $17,000 for it from a tax certificate buyer. They used to give me a list of like 200 properties. So I bought this motel for $17,000, 12-bedroom motel in Florida, renovated it. I sold it on payments the first time, bought it back, and then renovated again and sold it for $550.
Okay. And
big numbers.
That's big. And it's funny, big numbers, and then now in oil, those are like peasant, literally. You're adding a few more commas.
Yeah.
If you wanted to get 100 deals in real estate today, based on what you've learned, what would be the fastest way, and what would be the way that you would do it?
Deals in which regard? Like
wholesaling deals.
So, I mean, I was never a major wholesaler, right? Like we did
more fix and flip, right?
I did wholesale deals because I'd have surplus of deals. And my rule with wholesaling was if I'd buy it to flip it, I'll wholesale it. if I wouldn't be willing to buy it to flip it, I never wholesale it because I didn't want to. Most of my buyers are friends and my network, so I didn't want to just send them shitty deals. That's I think the problem nowadays with wholesalers. They're not finding deals, so then they're trying to push bad deals on bad fix and flippers, and that's why
The industry is like pretty separate.
it's terrible right now. Personally, novations were really popular for a period, but the downfall is too many people are doing them incorrectly, right? So they're not putting the right contracts in place, and I think that's going to blow up eventually. I think novations probably is going to have a timeline to it, just like wholesaling. I mean, legislative coming in. I don't really have a clear answer for you, I'll tell you, because I don't like pitching things I don't believe in, and right now I don't believe in the residential real estate market, to tell you the truth.
Is it because of the economy or just what has happened in the last?
I just don't see the affordability factor, right? I mean, my whole career in fix and flip was all based around affordable houses. And we have a massive shortage of affordable housing. And people state, hey, we need to build more houses and stuff. One of my friends, Jason Hartman, he talks about it all the time. He's like, hey, we need to build more. And he's correct. But the downfall is you've got a large delta of people that are soon going to be squeezed out. If you look at the middle class, it's getting squeezed every day. I mean, if the middle class now, honestly, if you're under $250,000 a year, you're in the lower class. As sad as that is to say, I mean, it's just the truth. $100,000 spends like $40,000 used to. So if you think of that middle class area getting squeezed, a lot of houses in America are between 4 and 800,000, maybe, or 350 to 800,000. So if you have a surplus, of houses that people can no longer afford, and the upper echelon of life, they're buying the big ones, and the lower is down here, you're gonna have all these available houses sitting around, and a lot of people flip in that $300,000 to $800,000 range.
In and out.
I think that's going to be problematic soon. I could be wrong, and I'm just not thrilled with real estate. That's why I'm not in it.
Yeah, I'm new to the real estate game. I've been working with my business partner for about 2 years. We work with real estate investors rather than actually do the real estate. But it's interesting to hear because it's from what they tell me, it sounds like wholesaling has been a hot topic for like over a decade, and it seems like every year they're trying to push more and more. Laws and regulations to stop it, but I don't know. It seems like it's an interesting game. I mean, we're talking about millions of people's lives.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you where wholesaling is going wrong. A lot of guys had really good success in 2020, right? I'll tell you, my mentor, Lee Carney, he's the guy that really got me skyrocketed. He's done over 8,000 deals. He at the time was going through COVID in the hospital, and we were talking about the market crashing. When COVID happened, where we were already leading up to it, assuming the market was going to have a correction based on what was going on, the saturation and everything else, COVID skyrocketed the real estate market. So a lot of guys had really good success end of 2020, 21. Well, then when things started tightening up around the interest rate time, everybody hopped from, hey, I'm a new wholesaler to, hey, I'm an educator. The downfall is if you don't have a decade of experience, and I'm not stating that based on me, I just, in my belief, you got to have a substantial amount of years to educate people. If you don't have that forefront or understanding of what goes on every interaction, you're training people on your limited knowledge. So you're taking your knowledge that you made in a year or two, you're training up somebody else. But the downfall is it's almost like if I told you a secret and you told the next person, it gets diluted, right? I think that's what's happening with the industry. You got so many people that are being empowered with enough knowledge to be dangerous. And they're cutting corners because they don't look at it as somebody's home, right? You got a wholesaler, hey, I'm gonna wholesale you this house. Well, if you don't buy it, oh, sorry, Mr. Seller, like it's gone. These people are real people. I mean, they're depending on you to sell that house. That's why the complaints are coming in, because too many people are waiting till 2 or 3 days before the contract ends, dropping the people. They got a U-Haul in the driveway. The amount of deals I even 3-4 years ago, I used to pick up because I get a call, hey, our buyer fell out. Do you mind picking up this deal, Alex? I'm like, sure, take out your wholesale fee. Like, I'll buy it without your wholesale fee because I'm not going to commend you for waiting until a day before the freaking deal closes. And then you come to me to bail you out. Like, yeah,
that's crazy.
Take out your fee and then I'll buy it and keep your reputation.
Yeah.
Most guys won't do that. I bought back, I had a buddy of mine that I went to high school with him, right? Got him into real estate. His second deal, I sold him. I cleared a $50,000 wholesale fee on it. It was a really good deal. I sold him for $150 or $135, and it was a $300,000 ARV. So I already pulled a good deal. 2 months later, he got into the property because I had a tenant and had a sinkhole in it. He called me out, freaking out. I bought back that deal. So I bought it back, even though it was a sinkhole, cleared him of his money, gave him his cash back. I said, hey, you know, my reputation's worth more to me than you getting a shit deal for me and, you know, blaming me. People don't do that. The real estate community is very shit.
I was going to ask, like, where did this happen? Because it feels like when I go to the events, and we're in a lot of the same groups. I mean, Family Mastermind, like some of the best people in the world, right? Where are people losing like their dignity to do this? Is it just because they're so money hungry, or like?
Yeah, that's the truth. Nobody's gonna tell you that in the real estate world, but I don't give a shit because I'm not in real estate anymore.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is, people realize that teaching, it's just like anything, right? It's easier to teach 1,000 people than do 1,000 deals.
Yes.
So they rather showcase some level of, you know, hey, this is what you do, but. The other problem is, if you notice, the majority of educators target newbies. The reason why is because they don't know better. Yeah, they don't know better. I only ever did mentoring, besides 2-3 people that I personally knew. I only ever did mentoring to scale. So I was more interested in taking somebody from $20,000 a month to $100,000 a month versus teaching them 0 to 20, because at least they have the fundamental skills that I can run with.
Right.
But people prey on the new, and you know, I personally absolutely hate all these like and stuff. I mean, you know, we're about to see them next week, but sorry guys. I think it's BS. I mean, they basically have sales guys sitting in the back telling people, go check your credit limit so I can get 25 grand off you. That should be illegal. I think it is. If you got a person that doesn't make $50,000, $60,000 a year or barely, and you're putting $25,000 on their credit card and you already know, majority of people already know that 95% of people will never execute. It's just common standard, right? People just don't want to do the work. You're putting them in a worse financial position by taking their 25 grand, empowering them with knowledge that they're not going to implement, and now you're putting them in a worse position. You can brag about your sales numbers all you want to, but I think you're a piece of shit.
And what goes around comes around, man. I'm a big believer in karma, and I think those people are going to find it. And I came from the marketing agency space, and it's so interesting because marketing agencies it's so similar because they both prey on younger and less experienced people, and it's a 10K package, and then you're basically, they make it seem so easy to get your first few deals, which is not hard, but
and I don't want to just like push on. There's tons of other companies do it, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's success stories there.
Yeah.
But I've personally educated a handful of people that came from platforms like that. They spent 50 grand, never got a single deal done. They came to me, I got them their first deal in 2 weeks. Because I actually put the work in, right? I gave them effort. And I didn't have to. I just did it because I felt bad.
And isn't it interesting, there's no people that are teaching you about oil? Like if I wanted to join an oil teaching program, it's too expensive. No. It's all about your network, right? Yeah. It's not, no one's out there like make your first 7 figures with oil. Like that's not a...
Well, I'll give you an example. In the last 18 months, assets aside, I spent probably $2.3 million just in operational cash, getting it rolling, whatever. My software fees alone are 200 grand a year just to evaluate deals and underwrite stuff. Like I have 200 grand a year.
It's crazy.
Just software, right? And that's not even crazy. Like some companies are paying way more.
I'm sure.
I'm baby bear and I'm building, but you know, you got all these fees, you got all these expenses. It's not realistic to teach people oil and gas. And anybody that tells you otherwise is just trying to get your money. Just being frank. I personally believe that even in my statute, you know, where I was and stuff, I probably, if I didn't have my network, I probably wouldn't want to get into oil and gas unless I had 5 to 10 million as a basis point. Like let's say I didn't have my network and all these rich people I know and stuff to take money from. I would assume a general guy would need 5 or 10 million bucks to kind of get it rolling.
Yeah, that makes sense. You talked about your network. What do you think? And how do you think your network has expanded beyond the fact that you're good at what you do and you're a personable person? Like, do you think it's just like you like to have fun and you take people on trips, or is like, how did you?
No, I mean, sure, there's some of it, but I'll tell you, with my party days, I mean, I spent a lot of money, right? I did a lot of yachts and stupid stuff, and those people, you can kind of. It was actually a good way of validating a person, right? So if I take out 10 people from the business world, and only one of them brings up chipping in or doing something, right? I'm not like hosting them. We're going out. If I'm the one that's always paying for stuff and I watch people when the check comes and stuff, I watch that stuff. It's the same thing. I won't do business with somebody. If I go to a restaurant and they're rude to the wait staff, I won't do business. That's been my mentor's rule for a long time, and I follow that same suit.
Is how you do everything.
Yeah. So I think it was beneficial in that regard. I don't think a lot of the people that I have had long-term instilled relationships with came from that era. At the time, it made sense because I had like hard money lenders and stuff and private lenders. That was smaller, right? But I would say most of my network has come from higher end masterminds. You know, like family masterminds, a really good one. A lot of people in there. But it's how you treat people, right? If you treat people well and you do good business with them and things like that, they will always connect you. You know, the gentleman I had dinner with last night, he said to me, he's like, hey, you know, I got a bunch of friends that are interested in doing different investments. They're all doctors and blah, blah, blah. You know, I'd be interested in having you do a presentation to them because, you know, he recognizes the fact that I do his, you know, good business. I don't go out there to try and screw anybody. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, it sounds silly, but there's a lot of people that aren't worried about their reputation. And we've seen that. We've seen the rise and fall in real estate, right? There's a lot of guys that have peaked and gone down. I believe your reputation stays with you for life, regardless of how much you think you can scrub it. You know, if you do shitty business, you're going to get reminded of that for a long time. And I've personally, if I've had an issue that even wasn't in my control, I've always tried to remedy it or pay up the money because I'd rather keep my reputation than be that guy.
Takes years to build your reputation, seconds to destroy it.
Yeah, it's 100% factual.
And we've seen that, you know, money industry. So as we wrap up, you know, for someone that wants to get into oil, right? And maybe they're like, okay, because it sounds like there's a couple of ways of working with what you're doing. One is becoming an investor potentially, or eventually starting their own thing. What are some tips and advices you would have on that end?
I mean, if you're going to start your own thing, I'm not afraid of competition. Clearly, there's a massive amount of big operators in the industry. I would say with your own thing, just make sure you're properly capitalized. I've definitely been fortunate to have a really good network, and that's where my financial backing comes from. We did the fund actually to have more flexibility with our buying. So what you have to realize is every capital guy you deal with is going to have different criteria. So if I'm able to be flexible, and I built a financial model all around cash flow for you know, the specific assets we're buying, that's why I did my capital fund. But if they're going to go into it, just make sure you have enough capital, because it's not a, you know, oh, you can go buy this lease and re-enter this well.
Wholesale.
People are people talking about wholesaling leases. I just chuckle at them because I'll tell you this. Here's another kicker most people don't talk about. My title work costs between 5 and 7% of the acquisition. So if I buy a deal for $100 million, it'll cost me $5 to $7 million in acquisition fees. So if you want to, and that's before you purchase it, right? Like last year, I probably lost $250,000 that we passed on deals that we already did the due diligence, and we got to the point where we just passed on it because it had, you know, environmental issues or some kind of stuff.
Is that like the final step basically, and that's where the deal was lost, or?
No, yeah. So we have a process, and I kind of talk to this on my platform and whatnot, but basically you can kind of do initial underwrite, then you go a little deeper, you do a field visit, and then you do a title examination with your legal team. But it adds up. It's very expensive. I mean, you've got leases that go back 100 years on these oil fields. So you have to trace the owners all the way back, and you also have to trace the mineral owners. And like, for example, I have 8 natural gas wells in Austin, Texas. It's got 600 mineral owners we pay out. So you got 600 different people you have to trace the lineage from.
So I'm just kind of thinking, like, so a lot of your audience and a lot of the people whose podcasts you're going on, they're so used to real estate terms and real estate money, and then you're coming in and you're adding a few commas, and I think people are just gonna kind of.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, and don't get me wrong. Like I was talking to my girlfriend last night, and we were chuckling because, you know, I'm doing the $25 million fund right now. We're raising capital for that to go buy $100 million worth of assets, and the kicker is, you know, oddly enough, I've gone through so much in real estate that like the deal coming up, I'm gonna borrow $15-16 million for it, right? And I'm signing off on that. And I'm not fearful of it, but she laughed and she's like, oh, you have balls of steel. I'm like, no, I just think I'm desensitized. I've just dealt with so many different wild scenarios that it doesn't really intimidate me anymore. I don't feel, you know, I'm not trying to be cool or badass or anything. I just genuinely, I'm like, all right, it's numbers, right? Once you hit a certain threshold in life, it's just digits. You know, if you understand money, you understand how to scale things. But on another note, though, if they do want to invest, if they are accredited, right? So my fund is a 506C, Reg D, SEC regulated fund, so I can't just take on anybody. But it's $100,000 minimum, and they have to be accredited, meaning $1 million net worth or 200,000 individual income, or 300,000 as a couple. That makes you accredited. You can look up the rules on SEC. I'm no attorney or anything, but we have a SEC attorney that drafts all my stuff. So.
And what's the selling? Let's say, okay, you have someone that wants to put in, let's say 200 grand.
Yeah.
They're credited, everything's good.
Yeah.
Well, like, what do you promise on the end? Like, what's the?
You can't promise with funds. I mean, it's a equity fund, so nobody
Yeah.
promises stuff. We have a 10% preferred return. So whatever they invest, they get a 10% preferred return. Annualized, we'll do a 5% bonus on cash flow. But bear in mind, we're leveraging our money. So the goal is to pay down the debt within 5 years. And then at the end of it, we exit the asset and we 50-50 on the exit. So the goal is for them to be 22%.
After 5 years.
Yeah, each year. So 2.2x multiplier.
2.2. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, awesome. Well, Alex, make America remote again. You are doing it. You're doing it in the US, which I love. And I mean, someone like you is inspiring not just to your day to day, but you are someone that started from real estate.
Yeah.
You were just a real estate guy.
I was a broke man when I started then too.
And then now you're talking about oil and billions of dollars. And I think the numbers that you're saying, a lot of people,
It's hard to compromise.
It's hard to comprehend.
Understand, yeah.
I just hope that it inspires them because really, if you can do it, like, you started as a real estate guy, like.
I mean, I have a high school diploma.
That's what I'm saying. You didn't come from money. You didn't come from any of that stuff. So I think I hope it inspires someone to like, yeah, I can make $1 million. I can make $10 million. I can make, and then from there,
Yep.
the future is inevitable. So thank you so much for coming.
Yep.
Make America remote again. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching.
Guys.
Tune in, like, comment, subscribe, and see you on the next episode.